Would you rather have wireless on the most reliable network nationwide or unlimited with 5G for $30 a month per line? You don't have to choose with Xfinity Mobile. Wireless so good it keeps one-upping itself. Most reliable based on Roots Metric US report. Results vary, not an endorsement. $30 per month per line when you get 4 lines.
Hi there, I am Adem Kirbas. I'm here in Turkey, in Ordu, a region in the Black Sea, or a town in the Black Sea region. We are still in the pandemic, still the coronavirus. I hope you all are doing fine and that we will eventually get past this with a lot of care. Well, today I want to talk about especially the millennial era. We have been working there for quite a while. I mean, it was necessary somehow, or at least it was important that we lay the groundwork, that it is understandable and what we are talking about. And despite the fact that I do not believe that solely your social backdrop, your social milieu, or your socio-economic background determines your thinking. Not at all. Human beings are different. That this is what makes us different from animals, and human history is a scathing indictment for anyone who thinks otherwise. Humans have a superior brain, and this brain power enables them to somehow create their own nature and even interfere in the nature and so on. So this is genuinely human. So humans are not prey of the circumstances they are living. I know there are a lot of calamities and atrocities in this world, and that you cannot always change your fate. But however, nevertheless, we have to be aware of one thing, and this is that humans have a superior mind, and that we therefore change history, that we are part, that we are one species, as you want in the animal kingdom, who can actively change the outcome, and this makes us different. However, this is the millennial era, and it is somehow a bit difficult to talk about the millennial era. I mean, this is in general the case. If you end a new era and start a new era, postmodernism is a fancy word which means actually nothing else than some sort of a after modernism. This is, you don't know quite what comes thereafter. This is the word post. This means I would rather consider postmodernism as a phrase to understand somehow in between. So this means postmodernism is rather an era after modernism, and then somehow you are in the waiting room for the next era to begin. This is postmodernism, and postmodernism is indeed very short. It pretty much starts, as you can say, so around with the First or Second World War, and then I would say it ends with the fall of the Berlin Wall, and that the former communist countries are being integrated in the global economy. The Americans become the superpower. So but this doesn't last long. We all know the rise of China, and China with this Belt and Road initiative, as well with other things, pretty much questions American world dominance, as well as you know or might not know, is that Americans, this is especially after the Trump presidency, it became apparent that America rather wants to deal with their own issues, which is indeed something they have to deal with. If you only compare the infrastructure of America, one of the wealthiest countries in the world with the infrastructure of China or even Europe, then they fall way behind. So America somehow has a low footprint on the world stage. This is the development in the last years, and we will see where this is going. And even though now with the Joe Biden administration in power, nevertheless, especially in the pandemic, America, of course, wants to deal with their own issues first. I mean, this has proven itself with the vaccination, with the vaccines. Wealthy countries could buy them. But I don't want to get into this. However, but I think I will have to talk about postmodernism, this dubious era of in between modernism and postmodernism, this some sort of waiting for a new beginning. And this is, you could say, pretty much with the end of the Soviet Union and with the rise of the new media, social media, and I will talk about it shortly, is the end of modernism. There is no postmodernism. This is not at all, because after postmodernism, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, or if you want, after the rise of the internet, the personal computer, the changes. This is what I talked about it in the, before, and this is why I want to emphasize this again. Those significant changes, they occur with the rise of the internet. This is indeed, we live indeed in an area which comes with a significant change, and with this significant change we have to give this new area a new name, and it deserves. It is not because we fancy ourselves with new names, but giving a new name helps you to talk about the differences, and I will prove or talk about this today, as well as in some next episodes, that there was indeed a difference in growing up, or is indeed a difference in growing up as a baby boomer compared to growing up as a millennials. This is indeed a difference, and that's why we do not call everyone baby boomers, or like in the German language sphere, 68er Bewegung. This has changed, and different vocabularies help us to make this change visible. However, what we talked about is the fall of the Soviet Union, and I want to talk about the fall of the Soviet Union briefly, but not what really happened. I mean, I am well aware that everyone has History Channel or Google or whatever, the fall or why it fell. You can pretty much inquire, and it is only secondary to understand the backdrop of the millennial. But I want to talk about the implications of the fall of the Soviet Union for leftist philosophy, for leftist worldview. And this is because I read, this was a couple of years ago in the university, I don't remember the name of the author anymore, and this was an article about why the left somehow changed, or why after the fall of the Soviet Union no one within the left, as well as in general leftism, would be waning, especially Marxist ideas were not on vogue anymore. So, and this is article dealt with it. I thought it back then, it was not very accurate, and some thoughts when I prepared for today's episode, I gratefully I remembered this article a couple of years ago. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't remember the author anymore. I mean, it was in the university, but maybe some who hear this, listen to my podcast, will help me out with it, or will write it in any comment section before. However, I want to talk about this. Why the interest of Marxism is waning. And I think one thing, yeah, it is true that the interest in Marxism is waning, but, and it's a huge but, not the interest on leftism. You have to be aware that if you only see in the news media, Me Too movement as well as Black Lives Matter movement, all this protest culture in our age, and this is very important, this Occupy and protest culture, that this is indeed actually proof that leftism is not waning. Conservatives or conservative thinking does not take over. This is not the case. This is nothing you find in reality, but rather the interest in Marxism is waning. This is true, and I thought about it. I thought about it back then, and I want to share my thoughts with you. One thing which I observed, this was in the university as well as partially outside of the university, that many young folks, even today, but as well as my generation, they actually do not read Marx in a way. Of course, the Marx and Engels, that if you want to read everything, yeah, this is a lot. I don't know how many books they wrote in total, and I did not read every one of them, but nevertheless, Marx, and this is, you have to be aware of one thing, and this is that there is indeed a difference between Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. There is not only a difference in intellectual prowess, which I assume Marx was indeed the smarter of the two, as well as as philosophical approach. I talked about this, but to say it briefly, Friedrich Engels was rather influenced by Spinoza, whereas Marx was influenced by Hegel and even went beyond Hegel and to cut to the brass tacks is that Marx was not a metaphysician, whereas Engels was. This is something this is pretty much visible in the literature. So Marx was intellectually of a different level than Engels. However, I don't want to go into detail because this would be that we really have to talk about it very extensively, and this is not the case and place for this. But nevertheless, Karl Marx's most important work is the Capital, in German, das Kapital, and this is actually very important. So if you want to understand the core of Marxism, if you want to understand the core of Karl Marx's own thinking, you have to read das Kapital. This is, I would say, like I said, you do not have to like Marxism, and if you read das Kapital, this does not mean that you become a communist or whatsoever, and I will talk about it shortly why not, but the Kapital, I said it before, is one of those few profound analyses we have about an economic system. It is indeed a huge difference to some statements, especially from the liberal economic school of thoughts, which say that the market would somehow adjust and monitor itself by this invisible hand, and you do not know how and why. Maybe I do not justice to this thought school, but however, this is indeed a difference. And in this, Marx is unique, and the Capital is really important to not only understand Marx, but as well as what makes Marx different from all other socialists. And this is indeed that the Capital is very important in that sense, because it brings into socialism science. This is very important, and this is the huge difference to Marx and his predecessors, because Marx was not the first socialist. This is very important. Marx was among many few, but really what makes Marx different from all other socialists is because he brought science into this entire socialism, into this entire communist structure. And most of the youth, they actually read this communist manifesto. This is some sort of popular address which Marx and Engels wrote, but this communist manifesto, this is not, if you read it, this is somewhat plain, and it does not show the difference what makes Marxism different from other socialists before him and after him. So most of the youths today, they are not interested in this deep literature or in this deep understanding of economic processes. I mean, I showed in the past and previous episodes Marx was wrong. Nevertheless, it is worth reading it, because despite the fact it is wrong or it is not accurate, I think it animates you to thoughts. You can bring in your own thoughts, even though someone may be wrong. Nevertheless, his or her wrongness can help you to understand more thoughts and say, yeah, well, I have my own thoughts whatsoever. Then, of course, we have to be aware of one thing, that Marx lived from 1880 to 1883. This means that his observations, mostly his observations, are to be confined in England, are to be, you could say, this is still the first stage of the industrialization, still the industrial revolution. This is somewhere still the first stage. The Capital was written from 1867 to 1883. It is 3 volumes, so there are 3 volumes, but mostly it is known as one. But the first volume is, I think, the most important one, because in the first 200 pages you get an understanding what Marx means with dialectic and dialectic materialism and so on. However, and this is of course, I mean, if you want to come back to the question why interest in Marxism is waning, I mean, of course, it is not up to date. Das Kapital, Marx's analysis, was written before the shift to consumer capitalism. This is Marx wrote about, in some instances, about fetish, about that people some sort of associate or have a liking for special goods, whatever. But he did not foresee consumer capitalism, and how I pointed out before, that Marx did not see some core developments within the capitalistic system, and this was, of course, that technological development, and that these developments then create their own market with their own rules and whatsoever, and that Marx and his analysis, that this was unique back then, and it is still unique to this very day within Marxism, as well as within the Marxist school of thoughts. The accomplishment of Marx are still unmatched, unrivaled. So within the leftist school of thoughts, there was no one really who had this intellectual prowess and depth depth of Marx to really analyze this economic system, because Marxism is not about the communist manifesto, but it is plain and dry about economic processes. And if you want to be called Marxist, then you have to read the Capital. This is very important, and this is of course one of the reasons why someone might assume Marxism or leftism is waning. But again, there are a lot of movements. There are movements like Occupy, Black Lives Matter, and Me Too, which is very present. I mean, think about cultural appropriation. This has become one of the most, you could say, conflicted, as well as one of the most predominant or dominant definition and words in our time. So leftism as exists to this very day. I mean, you could say that Marxism has some sort, in a way, lost touch to modernity. And one thing, of course, you need to know about Marx, and this is something you will realize when you read Marx and Engels in that sense in these 3 days, is that they of course talk about this proletarian revolution, the overthrow of the government, and then the working class establishes a dictatorship, and this dictatorship would be for the benefit of all, because it would dissolve the state and so on, and then in its continuation the capitalistic system. However, but there are no real. This is actually one big issue in Marxist literature, is that there are actually no real scenarios how this communist society should actually look like. I mean, how should you think about the communist society? There were some attempts. There is a very which is indeed within the leftist thoughts very popular. This is communitarism. This is some sort of a community which partially thought about how a communist society may look like, but of course this is very loose. So Marx and Engels did not really write about how this communist society should look like. There is one very important writing or essay of Friedrich Engels, and this one should read as well. And this is I will have to translate it, the Ursprung der Familie, the origin of the family, the Ursprung der Familie in German, the origin of the family. I don't know whether they use the same title in English, but however, this is important as well. So how Engels thought, what led to the dissolvement of family. And don't get me wrong, even very conservatives actually have read this essay of Engels about family and why the capitalist system destroyed this family. And some lefties and communists have to some sort of try to deduct and try to derive some thoughts from this paper, that we should somehow go back to this Ursprung, to this state or previous state or to this origin, that we should go back to its origin. But I mean, this is very tricky, of course, and I mean, I don't want to go into detail, but it is very interesting, and those who are interested in the dissolvement of family and so on, this is very interesting. And of course, we have to talk about feminism as well, that Marxism cannot really grasp feminist thoughts. You have to be aware of one thing, that feminism or even social issues, whatever, are always subordinated to the struggle of the working class. This is very, very important, because Marx puts the emphasis on the working class, and that the struggle of the working class is synonymous with the struggle of the entire society, despite the fact that the working class was never the overall majority, like Marx it always predicted. It was never so. The workers in the West, in Western Europe, as well as in North America, never exceeded 50% of the population, and I mean really industrial workers, how Marx saw them, because and even today in Western Europe as well as in North America, I think they do not even make up 10% of the overall population. So of course there was a change, technological change, and here it comes again. Technological change changed as well as those working classes, because now more than ever we live in a society which rather renders services and so on. And this is part of the feminism as well, that Marxism, and this is one should really put an emphasis on, is actually Marxism in its core has actually no means whatsoever to solve issues which is in the current state within the society, which are in the present, because solving issues like equality within the law, for example, that we should fight for equal laws, or that we should fight racism or whatever, that these things they are always subordinated to the struggle for this communist society and the destruction of capitalism. So in the Marxist literature, it is always about, once we have reached this communist society, despite the fact that he always was vague about how this society should look like, but nevertheless, the origin of all evil for Marx and for Engels was the capitalist society, and once we have dissolved it, then everything would be better, because then humans would start to think about, how this should work was always pretty much tricky, given the fact that Marxism somehow advocates, this is not Marx, this is rather Engels, but advocates that you would be determined by a socio-economic background, and a worker and or someone who is being exploited. How should someone who has learned nothing else as being the victim, as being exploited, how should someone like this learn some sort of humanism, some sort of have compassion for other people? We know the answer. We know the answer in some instances in the Soviet Union. These people, they do not had any compassion for whatsoever, and it was actually never really a proletarian society. However, so everything is subordinated, and this somehow makes you ask or questions, what sense does it make to protest on the streets or whatsoever, because the main goal is one thing, and this is to destroy the or overthrow the government. Anything else is a waste of time. So if you advocate for equality, anti-racism, or for more rights of the LGBTQ community, then you are just wasting resources and time, and how this would be solved in the communist society anyway. And then, of course, another reason why Marxism is not appealing anymore within the left is indeed the atrocities committed of Marxist regimes. Think about Stalinist terror. I would say, if you read about Stalin, there are, of course, not many documents of him. Do not make a mistake about it. Stalin never wrote anything. There are documents or some essays which presumably Stalin wrote, but these are not from him. He just wanted to enhance his popularity among the working class. Stalin was a cold-hearted, a merciless murderer. He had no compassion for anything, not even for his own children. However, but it was not only Stalin, it was as well as Mao Zedong in China, or Cambodia with Pol Pot. This was really bloody, as well as today in North Korea and Cuba. And of course, Marxist ideology then lost its appeal because of these atrocities, and this is something one should be always aware of, that during the existence of the Soviet Union, the left scarcely really, or at least publicly, scarcely criticized the Soviet Union. This was some sort of, even today, you can find this with Venezuela. Many think that criticizing the Maduro administration and those atrocities in Venezuela would be some sort of against Marxism and would be treason and so on. I mean, this is sad, but this is one of the reasons why this is waning, of course. And of course, you have to be aware of that after the fall of the Berlin Wall, this was pretty much the end of the mystic, you want to say, of the fairy tale. In German, there is a very good expression for this border, and this meant der Fall des Eisernen Vorhangs, Eiserner Vorhang, which means the Iron Curtains, and after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union, this Iron Curtain fell, and you then saw what's behind the curtain, what was hidden for so long. And then those leftists from the West then had first experiences, had witnesses to question about who then would report about communist society, how it was, and how it was to live there. A very famous example, of course, is Germany, Eastern Germany. The DDR was communistic, and if you hear these people reporting how life was, I mean, this is pretty much horrific, what you might think, so that everyone was some sort of a spy, and you had to be aware of what you're saying, what you're doing. I mean, you could this partially compare to some places in today. So this meant that the left was struck with reality. I mean, this was a very brief thought, I would say, why leftism or Marxism is not very popular among the left, despite the fact that leftism is still strong there is still Me Too movement, there is still a Black Lives movement, but you could say, and this is what I will talk about in later episodes, that there are indeed issues. What is going wrong right now within leftism. I mean, it is not always all pitch and it is not all good, those developments within the left. However, I mean, now we talked about the fall of the Iron Curtain, then everyone saw what was behind this Iron Curtain. Now I wanna talk about the technological age, which I think is one of the most defining moments, of the millennial age, or the backdrop, the socio-economic backdrop in which millennials grew up, and this is the rise of the personal computer and the internet, and this was a major event in human history. You can compare this to the Industrial Revolution. This was, you could say, and in some instances within the development human history, it is called a second Industrial Revolution, this technological age. And I want to briefly summarize, or briefly point out what really changed. I mean, one thing we talked about this was that the internet created a new market, new goods, and of course new professions. I mean, 30 to 40 years ago, no one would have known what is an internet graphica, what is a programmer, and so on. Okay, maybe a programmer they would have known, but there came a lot of new jobs with it. So I think we talked about this in very detail, that this was a huge development. But another huge development was what we today actually, or I would assume in America, no one really notices this, but with the rise of the internet, and because that the language of programming is English became the dominant language in the world. Before that, you could say French and partially Spanish were still very being used to, but with the rise of the internet, this pretty much ended any other aspiration. English became the dominant language, and even this is in Germany as well as in Austria. There is there's a term which is called which is called Denglish. This means that the German language is somehow dominated by English, and that the German language takes over a lot of vocabularies from the English. But I was surprised to find out that in America they have the term, this means Spanglish, that many Spanish words would be taken over by the American or by English. Well, I have not seen something like that, but in Germany it is really apparent. English is dominant. English has a huge impact, and English has of course I only overflow this, had a huge impact on German spelling, die neue deutsche Rechtschreibung, which means the new German spelling. Like I said, German is, or the German language, it is controlled by a central authority, and this authority then initiated a new transformation or change within the language. It got rid of those special parts of of the alphabet, or to make it very simple, it just made it easier for typing in English so that it would be understandable. There are some special symbols, you could say symbols in the German language which do not exist in English. Therefore, it is very difficult to write them, type them, and this was some sort of ease. So the English had a huge impact. The internet, or the internet language programmer, had a huge impact of how we talk about, and of course communication. Another change which came with the internet was, of course, the information. I talked about it the last time. I don't want to go into detail anymore, only to say that information, or how we receive information, changed. No more central source of information. Information is some sort of decentralized. This, of course, means, this is what I did not talk about. Of course, this means, in one hand, you could say, no government can tinker with information anymore. So if you do not trust the government, and there were indeed some issues in the past as well as today. What happened in Austria was one of this, but with the decentralization, you somehow have some checks and balances on this one central source. But of course, one huge issue is, and this is in today's media, this is the fake news, and now you somehow do not know what to believe anymore, do not know what to think anymore. This has become some sort of dire, you could say. So we millennials have learned to read between the lines, because you do not trust anything that's been put in front of you. This would be very foolish. And of course, you yourself create news as well. I will talk about this shortly, but on how you create news. Another big change is, of course, the end of the mall. The mall, even in my youth, I grew up in rural Austria, and in rural Austria it was really amazing to go into the mall, and this was experiencing, but this somehow changed with the rise of e-commerce. Think about Amazon. Think of Amazon and all this internet retailers. So we somehow, and one asks oneself, what will happen with all these huge malls? Because for example, here in Turkey, in Ordu, in my hometown, you could see that the town center is filled with shops. This is as well as in Austria, the Maria Hilferstraße, a very important shopping line, is filled with shops and so on. And what will happen with these places once they are gone? Of course, you could say, but in Vienna, it is having an affordable housing is a big issue. You could say, at least we will find a solution for this big issue. Who knows? But I think, especially now in the pandemic, it has become safer not to go into a mall anymore, or that these malls are really filled with a lot of people, and now it is easier and more safer to order it online, and this will be received to your home, as well as with drones, and that these things then arrive at your home. And this is one of the big changes, and we will see where this leads to with Amazon.
It's finally time to start firing up the grill. From city to shore, Acme is everything you need to prep for this summer season. Download the Acme app to shop for this season's essentials any way you want. Open the Acme app, clip your deals, then order your items online. An experienced Acme associate will carefully select your groceries, bag your order, and bring it right to your car or deliver right to your door. Download the app or visit acmemarkets.com for program details.